Next up, we're going to hear from Professor Ashley Bush, who's head of the Oxidation Biology Unit and Director of the Melbourne Dementia Research Centre. Professor Bush, along with Professor Amy Brodman, are the dementia theme heads. So over to you, Ashley.
Thanks, David. Our theme predominantly focuses on discovering the cause, treatment and diagnostic procedures that we need to manage dementias, the most common dementia being Alzheimer's disease and the next most common being vascular dementia related to stroke, but we're also interested in all the forms of dementia, including Lewy body disease and frontotemporal dementia, even the dementias associated with schizophrenia, which has a cognitive component. And this is a large theme with many projects going on and many investigators in a number of labs. And it runs the gamut from basic research with small animal models, including C. elegans, worms, and goes all the way through bench research to human studies with biomarkers, that is fluid biomarkers of the cerebrospinal fluid or blood, as well as imaging, molecular imaging of the brain in animals and in human beings, using resources such as PET imaging and MRI that are available through our networks. So we have a very high profile internationally, many important linkages, both within Australia and with other groups around the world. As I mentioned before, we have a kind of vertical integration, which is very practical. So projects that emerge are focused on translation. So we try to actually have an impact upon clinical practice, ultimately, whether it be through basic or drug discovery or translational research or any level in between. So it's not all about just clinical research, but we have access to strong clinical research as well. So Steve mentioned Kevin Barnum and Leah Beauchamp, Leah, who was a PhD student and made discoveries that had impact on the relevance of COVID to Parkinson's disease. And this will draw upon clinical cohorts that we have access to. And that just shows you the versatility of what our resources are like. And we do therefore work very closely with clinicians. We have purely clinical projects, but we also have translational work like Leah's and Kevin's in COVID, where they are working with clinicians to define what we would need to do in order to test whether Parkinson's disease is going to become a complication of the infection. Next slide, please. So we are very interested in developing and inventing the toolkits that are needed for neurological practice in terms of managing people with dementia. And that's the biomarker development. And biomarkers means any means of examining the disease or witnessing the biochemistry of the disease without actually opening up the organ and looking at it directly. So this involves fluid biomarkers, blood tests, CSF tests, and imaging like MRI, PET. So we have developed a number of procedures there, and both imaging procedures and blood testing procedures that are being explored for use in the clinic, and some of ours are actually quite well advanced in terms of potential clinical practice. We're also very interested in developing new drugs and discovering new biochemical targets for the dementias. And there are many opportunities there. The dementias have been very difficult to find disease-modifying drugs for. And so we've got our work cut out for us, but we're doing it, and we're very broadly interested in potential biochemical targets. There's a lot going on in the brain that can be adjusted with drugs, and we're at the forefront of being able to look at that. And then there are, of course, an aspect of our work is to work with the patients themselves. And we have strong neuropsychology facilities, and we are involved in clinical trials of drug interventions in dementias. And we have projects where it's possible to study cognition in these dementias and have a look at the impact of treatments on the outcomes. Next slide, please. Now, there's a very great number of potential projects, and I've just touched upon a few here, but I would say that probably our website is not as up to date as we wish it was with all the potential opportunities in terms of the science. It's a very rapidly developing area, and lots of new discoveries are made constantly at the Florey and elsewhere, and we capitalize on those to develop new projects. We like the projects for our students to be hot and fresh and useful and impactful, as well as you learning a lot about neuroscience in the meanwhile. So as a result, I would encourage you to contact either myself or any of our faculty to engage with them about any ideas that you might have in terms of projects you might want to explore. And as I say, there is a panoply of approaches from the very basic to the very clinical. Just to explain a couple of examples here, Dr. Pazzo is looking at the ubiquitin system in neurodegenerative diseases. This is a means of protein turnover that occurs, and he's made some major discoveries about the role of metals in regulating it. Dr. McCall studies the biology of aging itself as relevant to neurodegeneration. So why is it that age is the major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias? And he's studying the chemistry of that in the C. elegans, and has had recent findings about doubling the lifespan of these animals using pharmacological approaches. Very dramatically interesting results which have consequences that are of interest to all of us. I've mentioned Kevin Barnum's interest in COVID, but he also has a project about S-adenosine methionine, an over-the-counter supplement that may have a major impact upon the kinase pathways that are abnormally regulated in Alzheimer's disease. Professor Amy Brodman has a clinical trial going on of exercise as a means for recovering from stroke or preventing stroke. This is obviously clinical trial where there are a lot of opportunities for additional projects. In my group, we're focusing on the role of abnormal iron accumulation within the brain in Alzheimer's disease, and its connection with the genetic lesions that cause Alzheimer's disease, showing that Alzheimer's disease might actually be caused by an abnormal regulation of an essential mineral that accumulates over time in the aging brain. Again, just finish off by saying I encourage you to reach out to us and workshop ideas that you might want to pursue as projects, and it's far more flexible than what you might see listed on the website. So thank you.